Rub this on your skin, get a lover? That's not clickbait. It's a 16th century recipe written in all seriousness by the Italian natural philosopher Giambattista Della Porta. He recorded the formula for an ointment said to be used by witches. The claim was that it could induce an extraordinary phenomenon. It would make the witch believe she was flying, and it would culminate in an encounter with an ardent lover, or several. Here is how Della Porta describes what happens after it is applied. I quote from my own translation. They, the witches, believe they fly through the air on gibbous moon nights. They see banquets, music, parties, and mate with good-looking young men, who they crave ardently. That's from Magia, naturalis, first published in 1558, a book that sits somewhere between herbal compendium, alchemical handbook, natural philosophy, magic, and things that will definitely get you excommunicated. The infamous ointment wasn't just rumored, it was recorded, tested, and, yes, allegedly, even witnessed, with ingredients like bat blood, poplar leaves, and most infamously, children's fat. But what was really happening here? Was this a genuine magical formula, an aphrodisiac, or a medical misunderstanding, or an early form of psychedelic chemistry? Don't worry, we'll get to the full recipe in just a moment, and yes, it's somehow even worse than you think. Hello, lovely history fans. I'm Dr. Julia Martins, a historian fascinated by early modern medicine, magic, and alchemy, and a reluctant connoisseur of recipes that definitely shouldn't be tried at home. And if you would like to help me make more videos like this, you can support my work on Patreon. Now, I've spent years sifting 16th century medical and magical recipes, and nothing captures the tension between science and superstition better than this so-called flying ointment. This was a scandalous and controversial formula, and not just because of its connection to witchcraft, but also the exploration of female sexuality and pleasure. So, let's take a closer look at what this ointment was, what it claimed to do, and why it terrified so many powerful people. By the end, I promise you'll never look at depictions of flying witches the same way again. The chapter of Magia Naturalis that caused all this trouble, chapter 26 for those keeping score, bore the title, How to Induce Clear and Pleasant Dreams, as well as frightening and obscure ones. It is here that we find the recipe for what Della Porta himself calls the witch's ointment. He provides two versions, and neither will be going into your next skincare routine. The first begins, quite casually, they, the witches, boil children's fat in a bronze receptacle and skim off the layer which floats on the water. And we're off to a strong start. He goes on. They set what remains after evaporation, let it settle again, and keep it to use it when necessary. Into this, they mix apiaceae, aconite, poplar leaves, and soot. The second version swaps out some of the ingredients, including a few that modern toxicologists might describe as deeply inadvisable. Water parsnips, common yellow iris, potentilla, bat blood, solanum, which makes you sleep, and oil. Solanum, by the way, likely refers to Solanum nigrum, or black nightshade, a plant known for producing hallucinations, vomiting, and, in sufficiently generous doses, death. Once the concoction was ready, these women were said to rub it all over their bodies, but not before first warming the skin through vigorous friction. Della Porta writes, they grease themselves with fat or, in its place, with oil, so that the strength of these juices penetrates on the inside and is strong and more effective. In other words, heat opens the pores. Open pores absorb the ointment. A very hands-on approach to transdermal delivery. And the result? They, the witches, believe they fly through the air on gibbous moon nights. They see banquets, music, parties, and mate with good-looking young men who they crave ardently. So the quote I begin the video with. Now, Della Porta insists that he didn't just hear about this. He claims to have witnessed a woman, a witch, apply the ointment through gaps on a door, naturally. A group of men, himself included, observed her undress, anoint herself, and promptly fall into a deep sleep. The men entered the room and tried to wake her up from her stupor. She didn't respond to shouts, shaking, or even what he describes with breathtaking nonchalance as beatings. When the woman finally awoke, she recounted her vivid journey, which included flying and participating in these orgies. The men insisted that she hadn't moved or left the room, but she didn't believe them. Now, this was very likely a made-up story, yet both the tale and the recipe are very telling. So what's Della Porta's takeaway? His conclusion was radical for the time. This story could prove that, arguably, there was no such thing as witchcraft. He argued that there were no orgies with devils and no true witches' sabbath involved here. These were just hallucinations, and the effect came from the hidden power within the plants themselves. Della Porta calls this a wonder of nature, which is rather polite considering the ingredients, but it was a way for Renaissance people to describe magic, the manipulation of nature to achieve wondrous effects. For Della Porta, this wasn't an aside, it was evidence that the boundary between delusion and nature could be studied, described, and, if one dared, replicated. He was going into very dangerous territory. So, we've got women rubbing themselves with poisonous herbs, flying through the sky, and dreaming of sexual banquets, at least in theory. Naturally, this raised some questions. How did early modern thinkers explain this? To answer that, we need to dip briefly, and I promise painlessly, into humoral theory. The basic idea was that the body contained 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health meant balance, illness meant imbalance. And emotional states, also connected to humus. Desire, melancholy, anger, all rooted in bodily fluids. Della Porta argued that the ointment worked by heating the body and opening the pores. This made the flesh, in other words, relaxed and permeable. The virtue of the plants, their hidden powers, could then penetrate the skin and affect the inner workings of the body, such as the humus. What he's really describing, in modern terms, is a physiological response leading to an altered mental state. The rubbing, the heat, the bodily openness, the entire procedure is practically choreographed. And Della Porta leans into it. He doesn't just mention the dreams, he specifies they involve music, dancing, and mating with beautiful young men craved ardently by the witches. This reads less like demonology and more like erotica disguised as pharmacology. And the ingredients back him up. Aconite, for instance, was known in polite circles as the queen of poisons, and Solanum nigrum, black nightshade, can induce delirium, stupor, and what physicians refer to as auditory phenomena. Henbane, often included in related recipes, produces a blend of hallucinations and total muscular collapse. These plants contain tropane alkaloids, powerful compounds that interfere with the body's neurotransmitters. Today, we call this anticholinergic toxicity. It creates a state of delirium where hallucinations feel entirely real. Back then, they called it flying to a witch's sabbath. Perspective is everything. And as for dosage, that was apparently a matter of intuition. No spoonfuls, no scales, just vigorous application until something happened. Ideally, not death. And as Paracelsus noted, the difference between medicine and poison is often a matter of dosage. It's the dose of the substance that matters, as the effects produced can be completely different. But the significance of these hallucinations went even deeper. It tapped into a long-standing discourse about the so-called secrets of women, knowledge concerning fertility, conception, and female sexuality. The ointment clearly borrowed some of this imagery, but twisted its purpose. Its focus wasn't on reproduction, but on transformation, of body, of mind, and of experience, without the oversight of man, of medicine, or the church. It's no coincidence that there's some overlap between this formula and aphrodisiacs in the same period. The image of a naked woman getting high and having erotic dreams made it radical, though. It suggested women could induce altered states, fantasies, even ecstasy, without a partner, beyond the control of husbands, physicians, or priests. The ointment made the body receptive, not to a man, but to an experience far harder to regulate, and that made people profoundly uneasy, especially the ones writing the laws, and the demonology books. So, if you're thinking, surely this caused problems, you are absolutely right. This is the time of the Reformation, and of the witch craze. People were being accused and convicted of witchcraft, and humanists and scholars were debating these subjects in all seriousness. The stakes were high, and nothing invites ecclesiastical scrutiny quite like a recipe involving women using bat blood, children's fat, and altered states of consciousness that no one could quite explain or control. Enter Johann Weyer, physician, skeptic, and all-around killjoy for witch hunters. In his De Prestigiis Daemonum, Weyer used Della Porta's ointment as evidence that witches weren't flying, summoning, or fornicating with demons. They were deluded, ill, or high, possibly all three. Flying Sabbaths and dream sex with demons, not supernatural, just symptoms. This idea aligned closely with what Della Porta was saying in his book, but this skeptical take infuriated the authorities. If you're still with me and not off concocting your own dangerous herbal salves, good, because now things get politically explosive. Jean Baudin was a legal theorist, demonologist, and apocalypse enthusiast, and he took Weyer's arguments personally. In La Démonomanie des Sorciers, he not only condemned skepticism, but singled out Della Porta by name. Baudin accused Della Porta of promoting heresy by daring to suggest that magic might be natural. Again, Della Porta's whole point with his book Magia Naturalis was that, as the name suggests, natural magic was the manipulation of nature to achieve marvelous effects. But this wasn't just a disagreement, it was an indictment. And by then, the Inquisition was paying very close attention to Della Porta. The difference between natural magic and demonic or black magic was blurry at best, and in 2 occasions Della Porta was brought before the Inquisition to explain himself. By then, he had essentially become a celebrity, albeit a controversial one, and his works were being translated in many European languages. The Latin edition of Magia Naturalis was placed on the Spanish Index of Prohibited Books in 1583. The Italian edition survived, just largely because the very cautious translator, with the very precision of someone keen to keep his head, quietly cut off the offending recipe, and several other problematic ones, like I mentioned in my previous video about faking virginity. You can sense the translator's anxiety as he assured the reader, so as not to inflame the curiosity of the impious, we shall silence these compositions. A polite way of saying, I've removed the bit about the witch's ointment, along with poisons, etc. Please don't arrest me. Meanwhile, the broader context wasn't improving. Across Europe, witch trials were escalating. The Constitutio Criminalis Carolina, the Holy Roman Empire's legal code, had helpfully standardized procedures for interrogations, including exactly how and how often and how much one could be tortured. Bureaucracy is a wonderful thing. In this climate, Della Porta's natural explanations weren't just bold, they were subversive. If witches' experiences could be caused by ointments, not demons, then the entire legal system built on confessions, pacts with the devil, and spectral evidence began to wobble. Worse still, the ointment didn't just mimic flight, it mimicked transformation, of perception, of sensation, of the body's relationship to authority. A woman alone in a room experiencing vivid realities that no one else could authorize? That was destabilizing. Not because she felt pleasure, but because she did so on her own terms. And so the ointment found itself condemned by both sides. Zealots who saw it as diabolical, and skeptics who dismissed it as nonsense. Della Porta, inconvenient as ever, suggested it was neither but something far more radical, a wonder of nature. Natural, empirically observable, and terrifyingly hard to regulate. So, what are we left with? A jar of ointment and a good story. A handful of hallucinogenic herbs. A woman asleep on the floor dreaming she's airborne and adored. And a furious backlash from theologians, censors, and legal authorities who couldn't agree what she was, but very much agreed that she needed explaining. And the same went for the author of the book. Della Porta didn't just describe a salve or an ointment. He described a mechanism, a way of understanding dreams, altered states, even belief itself, as phenomena grounded in the natural world. Not witchcraft, not heresy, just empiricism and suggestion and heat. And perhaps that was the real danger, not what women felt, but what those feelings suggested about the porous boundary between body and mind. If trance, ecstasy, even flight could be natural, then perhaps magic wasn't supernatural at all. Perhaps it was just misunderstood. Like the witch's porous body being susceptible to this formula, the line between what we now see as science and magic was just as blurry and porous in the past too. And while the flying ointment recipe no longer circulated after the whole debacle, the discomfort it provoked lingered, especially when it comes to knowledge that resists easy control or bodies that don't conform to the official story. The history of witchcraft is a gigantic and absolutely fascinating topic, and I've only scratched the surface here with this one recipe, but hopefully this video can make you question established narratives. Who should have access to knowledge? Whose experiences are valid? Who gets to tell the story? And when there is a witch hunt, who gets burnt at the stake? Those are all important questions we should keep in mind. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help me keep creating history videos like this, there's a Patreon link below. Every bit of support lets me dive deeper into the archives and share the strangest stories history has to offer. Thank you and see you next time!